Raise the Standard Podcast. Because the standard you set shapes the life you build.
Hey, aloha, everybody from Honolulu, Hawaii. Dr. William Finley, we have Coach Steve Richards with us. We got an amazing guest today that Coach Richards will introduce in just a second. Has an amazing book. It's been around for quite a while. #1 international bestseller. Named the #1 soccer book by football.com, and it's also been named one of the top 5 books of the year by the United Soccer Coaches Soccer Journal. The name of the book is Soccer IQ, and we'll dig into that here in just a few minutes. But before we get going, my partner in crime 8 miles away from me in Portlock, and I'm in Waikiki, Coach Steve Richards. What's going on, Coach?
No, like I said, I just had my coffee. You got me up early. I'm hanging out, living the Hawaii life. I know I filled my truck up yesterday. It cost me $156 to fill my truck up living in Hawaii. I
know. I saw that. That's just that's called the paradise tax out here in Hawaii, man.
Yep.
And one of the things we noticed, Coach Richards has got this fancy backdrop behind him. As he said a few minutes ago, he's spending way too much time on his computer lately, yeah?
Yeah, you become a coach and you end up being behind a desk most of the time, as we'll delve into with the new way of coaching these days.
Well, this is episode 4 of Raise the Standard, and by now you know kind of what our ideas are, concepts, our philosophy, why we began this podcast. We've had some very interesting guests thus far. Our first one was Chris Anderson out of the UK, one of Coach Richards' good friends. And then we had Dave Simeon, who everybody knows, especially here in the States, from the United Soccer Coaches, Director of Education, Training and Education, I believe. And then last week we had Coach Van Taylor out of Lannard University, one of the most iconic college coaches and still doing very, very well in his new role at Lannard University. So with that being said, Coach Richards, why don't you take the bull by the horns and let's get this thing going and introduce our special guest.
Yeah, I'd love to. My good friend, Dan Blank. Dan and I go back early 90s, I'd imagine, Dan. Could it be earlier than that?
Even 93.
Though Dan doesn't look that old, We used to nickname him the young Elvis back in the day with his sideburns, right? Dan was a director for us at Post to Post back in the day. And Dan's been a very successful coach throughout the years. And welcome aboard, Dan.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Dan, can you just go into a little bit about your career and what got you into coaching and what's kept you into coaching? Because, like I say, we met back in the early 90s and, straight from day one, we knew that you was going to be a inspiration in this world of coaching and role models for the kids, and let's know a little bit about you.
All right, well, so first of all, I had no intention of becoming a college soccer coach when I graduated college. My plan was to become a copywriter with an ad agency, but I didn't have the best academic career in college, so that kind of hampered me. I ended up deciding to try to join the Air Force. This was during 1991, so the Gulf War was on. I was living down in Myrtle Beach, and I met a woman whose husband was a pilot, and I was trying to sell her suntan lotion on a pool deck. And we're just looking out at this beautiful blue sky, and she's telling all about her life as an Air Force wife and how they get to go all around the world. And this doesn't sound too bad. So I quit my job at lunch and went to the Air Force recruiter and signed up to take my Air Force officer's test, which I eventually did on May 1st, 1991. I graduated college officially 4 days later. I still don't have my Air Force results. I was supposed to get them in 10 to 12 days. And I decided I would live in Pittsburgh for a little while, waiting for the results, and then I'd be off to officer training school. Well, the results never came, and I ended up flat broke, like really, really broke. And to the point where, you know, there was a stretch where I hadn't eaten in 2 or 3 days. And I I refused to move home because my parents were so against me moving to Pittsburgh in the first place, and I wasn't going to let them have that satisfaction. So I was determined to stick it out. And I called my college coach. I wasn't asking him for anything. I just wanted to talk. And he said, camps start today. We got 3 weeks of camps. Why don't you get down here? He said, you'll get 3 meals a day. I was like, sold. I get to eat. I'm in. And then I got, yeah. I mean, and I swear, so I got $300 a week for 3 weeks. I didn't get paid till the very end. I asked him to keep it. I got $900. At that point, it seemed like all the money in the world. But during that second week, it was girls' high school week. And I was assigned to be the assistant to Jimmy Regan. And we were coaching a team out of Hackensack, New Jersey. We had a great team. Jimmy and I got along great together. And just so happened during that week, his college assistant resigned to move on to another graduate program at Cleveland State University. So all of a sudden, Jimmy, who was at Wheeling Jesuit College, needed an assistant. I needed a job. And so he hired me to be his I guess officially it was a graduate assistant. And then, I stayed there for 3 years, moved on to Bruton Parker College for, I think, 3 or 4 seasons down there, had a pretty remarkable team down there. The 1995 team scored, I think it's 181 goals in 21 games, which is second most all time in total and also average per game. And then from there, I started the program at Embry-Riddle University, was there for 9 years. Then I got picked up at Ole Miss, was there for, I think, 3 seasons. And then after our 3rd season, the Georgia job came open. My boss got hired at Georgia. He brought me along with him. Steve Holman brought me to Georgia with him. So I was there for 5 years. Ended up leaving Georgia. To the end of the story, I'm now the head women's soccer coach at the college in New Jersey. So this is my 7th college or university, and it's going to be my last.
So Dan, obviously, you've had an extreme divisional wise as well level of coaching. What set your standards when you first went into the program? Obviously, with us, when we reflect on our journey, there's certain key people that we go, that person molded where I am today, and when Bill and I was talking about putting this together, we go, you got to set standards in your life to achieve what you want to achieve. Who was your role model, and how did you implement your standards with your first job?
So, I mean, I think I've had a lot of, I don't know if I'd call them role models, but I've had a lot of influences for sure. And I'm not saying I haven't had role models. I'm just saying I've spent very little time with Anson Dorrance, but through his books, I've picked up a lot. Working with you, Steve, I picked up stuff there from Steve Holman, from Jim Regan. My assistant college coach was Graham Ramsey, and he was very, very good coach. He was a bit of a soccer genius, and we knew that in our team. We knew we had a very good coach, but I didn't know how big of an impact he had made until my first 3 coaching licensing courses. So there was the USSFC license, the national, and the advanced national, I think, were my first 3. And in each of those courses, one of the instructors quoted Graham Ramsey, and I was like, really? I had no idea he was that highly revered. So from a soccer standpoint, I learned more from Graham in my first 3 months as a college soccer player than I probably had known my whole life going into it. I knew how to dribble, shoot, kick, whatever. But I didn't know how to think the game. I thought I did, but it turns out, nope, I was wrong. And so Graham was a huge influence. But in terms of standards, I think, I grew up very competitive. My soccer was not an option on television when we were growing up. Hockey, on the other hand, was. I grew up as a big fan of the Philadelphia Flyers. At the time, they were known as the Broad Street Bullies, and they were, just the most competitive group of people. And so they kind of became, I guess, role models of, in a certain way, of like protecting your teammates and competing. My dad was a big sports fan, and he always gravitated and pointed out the players who were clever. So, for example, my kind of Flyers idol was a guy named Bobby Clark. He was their captain. He wasn't particularly big. He was talented, but he was the guy who could change the game by doing something smart. He could bait somebody into a fight and not drop his gloves. Now, the other guy's got a 5-minute major. Flyers are on a power play. Or, there's a rule in hockey that your stick blade can only be so long. And so, if you're caught with an illegal blade, it's a 2-minute penalty. And Clark, from time to time, the Flyers would be down late in a game, and all of a sudden Clark would go to the referee and say, this guy's stick blade is too long. As it turns out, Clark had figured it out a month earlier when they played and just kept it to himself until he needed it, kept it in his back pocket. And my dad would point out those kind of things. So I always gravitated to those kind of clever, outthink, outcompete the opponent kind of competitors. Pete Rose was another one, just who he is as a person aside, or was as a person aside. I mean, the guy was excessively competitive. So my standards have always been, about building the most competitive arena possible in our training sessions. I don't know if that's kind of what you were looking for there.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Steve, you got your mic off, Steve.
We've been talking a lot on, what runs parallel with standards, and reflecting back on our coaching career, and talking to Van last week, it's like, how do you get your players in a mindset, to achieve what they want to achieve? How do you portray your coaching ability to create a mindset within your programs for success? How do you approach that? Because I came to your first tryout at Embry-Riddle, right? And you had soccer players with baseball cleats on, and I remember that distinctly. They were white. That's why I remember it. And I said to you, are you sure you want to do this, or are you getting into? And you was really positive with your mindset. You said, yeah, I can't wait to get going, get cracking here. So how do you walk into this and get your players in a mindset to be successful?
Well, me personally, I try to, at the beginning, I try to get them to look at the end, right? So when Sky was on, he was talking about Jim Valvano, right? NC State basketball, and how his dad packed a suitcase and said, I'll be there when you play for national championship. What he didn't mention is Valvano's first practice at NC State. The very first thing he did is he brought out a ladder, put it under the rim, and had the boys cut off the net like they had just won a national championship. Like, that was his very first thing he did on the court with that team. And I think, if you've got to start by giving them a destination and getting them to buy into the steps that are going to help them reach that destination. And then it's brick by brick, and it's all about, the standards that you're going to have to enforce, because it's, somebody once said standards are the lowest form of behavior you're willing to accept. And so they're your floor, right? And it's really difficult in a sport like soccer, where everything is so subjective, to kind of have some physical standards that, how do you measure courage on a soccer field? Right. It's very subjective, but, we try to every day think about what we're trying to accomplish at the end, right? Like, today is not about today. It's about 3 months from now. We constantly revisit the standards within our program. We constantly revisit the destination. The first meeting I have every preseason is just with the rookies. And I tell them, like, look, 4 years right now might seem like forever. I said, but eventually the day's going to come where a referee's going to blow a whistle, and that's it. Your college career is over, right? And everything you do between right now and that whistle, that's all going to add up to be your legacy, right? So you got to determine what you want your legacy to be right now, and then you spend every day working to build that legacy. So when you're gone, what are we going to say about you? What are your teammates going to say about you, your coaches, other student athletes, your professors, whatever? But don't leave it to chance. Draw it up. I tell them, like, look, take 15 minutes tonight and just jot some stuff down. What do you want your legacy to be? And then at least that way you know what you're heading towards.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I get from you from day one when I met you was consistency. Consistency and willing to learn. From a vast load of people you're around. And when I was talking to Bill about how we go about this, Bill's got a habit, and I think too. He'll throw a question out to see how you're going to answer it, and then he'll throw another question out for you to kind of analyze what you just said, and then he'll throw another question out, and before you know it, you've completely 180 degree the initial approach to what's going on, right? What would you say, and I think I know the answer, what would you not compromise on when you go into a program or you're teaching? What's your definite principle that you would never compromise?
Well, it's a great question. There's a lot that goes into that. Yeah. I think that the first and foremost is the team has to come first. The program has to come before the individual. And a lot of that comes down to your preparation, your work rate. Like, what are you willing to give of yourself to put this team first? Like, I inherited a great program, a great culture at the college in New Jersey. And they are so all about putting the team first. It's unbelievable. There's a sign on the front of our locker room door, so you see it before you go in. It says, if you're not ready to put this team first, turn around. And nobody knows when that sign went up, right? It probably went up in the 1990s. But that's kind of the attitude of, like, the players have a rule that you're not allowed to complain about playing time, right? Because if you complain about playing time, you're actually complaining about at least two people. You're complaining about your own playing time, plus you're complaining about anybody who's playing in front of you, right? So in those things tend to manifest off the field, in dorm rooms, in apartments, or whatever, off-campus housing. So they just 25 years ago, whatever, 30 years ago, the players got together and decided that's not going to be us. So they've created this team first culture, which, like, I'm so thankful and so blessed that I get to be a part of it every day.
How do you get that from a recruit, though? How from a player you identify to a player you invite in onto campus to a player that eventually registers for your program? How do you identify that as a player? Because a lot of young players these days, it's all about me and instant gratification. How do you weed out? Because how many people apply, like, send your email? How many email in your boxes to come to your school, for one? And then how do you weed through those applicants to get the player that you want for your program?
So there are moments, when you're out recruiting, you get little snapshots of players when they have the ball, right? So there are things that definitely make me perk up. Like, for years, and this is oversimplifying it, but I was always like, just give me fast and aggressive, I'll teach them the rest, right? But obviously that's not all there is to it, right? But when I see a player who's willing to, go to ground to keep a ball from rolling over the sideline, a player who's willing to block a shot, a player who loses the ball and then works ridiculously hard to get it back, right? Like those are the things I don't want to have to teach. You know what I mean? Like, and so then there's the other part of it is, you know, the kid who ducks the header, who will challenge for a header, but she'll foul intentionally because she really doesn't want to head the ball. She'd rather be called for the foul. So it looks like she tried to head the ball, but in reality, it was all, you know, smoke and mirrors. So that, you know, I try to steer away from those type of kids, but we do our research. You know, when we find a kid we like, we talk to her club coach, we talk to her high school coach. And then when we're sold on a kid, and if we're fortunate enough that she's going to come to our school, then, you know, the culture kind of takes over. You know, the many don't adjust to the one adjusts to the many.
What do you think a freshman struggles with the most when they first come into your program, or any college program?
Well, I think speed of play, right? Because all of a sudden you've just gone from playing U18 soccer to U23 soccer. So you're playing against bigger, faster, stronger kids. And, you know, every player on our team was basically the best player on our high school team, right? So we've got players who've been, you know, freshmen coming in who've started every game their entire lives. Well, you're joining a program with, you know, 29 other players who have that exact same credential, right? So I think it's the willingness to understand that, like, hey, this might not be where I start is not where I'm going to finish. You know what I mean? Like I might not get instant gratification. I've just got to put my faith in the program and the teammates, and be willing to grow with it. And we've been very fortunate. Like, since I've been at TCNJ, we haven't had a player transfer out. You know, they love their culture. They are as tight a team as I have ever coached.
Yeah, because I again, when we was talking, it's like, you're the one individual that I know that if there's any time we need to pick up the phone and say, hey, we're in trouble or we need help, you'll be the first one on the plane or on the area to come and help, you know. And we were saying before, because like before, Bill and I, we had 200 people that we knew separately, but we never met each other.
Yeah.
You know? And we have a lot of acquaintances in this business, but not a lot of friends. You know, and why do you think that is as well, with personalities, and what makes you gravitate to one another to be a friend and not an acquaintance? How would you put that down or equate that to the business?
Well, I mean, we spend a lot of time watching soccer games. You know, recruiting is one thing, right? So you get on the recruiting trail, you're seeing the same coaches week after week, and so you develop relationships that way. You know, you might go to dinner with some coaches afterwards. You know, the sideline interactions during games, when you're giving scouting reports, all that stuff adds up to it. But I mean, I'm very blessed. Like, Bill was the first head coach that I ever played against as a head coach, or that I ever coached against as my first head coaching game was against Bill. And it's amazing. Like, that was 31 years ago, I guess now, something like that, like, we've become friends because we didn't know each other from Adam really before that. And so, you know, and through Bill, that same trip, I met Steve Holman, who was the coach at Ole Miss. And then, you know, 20 years later, Steve's hiring me as his assistant at Ole Miss. And Steve and I, you know, we did our C license together. So we were in the same group. We were on the same, you know, team and so forth during that. So you make a lot of relationships based on just kind of where you are, and then seeking out the people who you think are going to be a good fit for you.
Yeah, it's funny because I was talking to Bill yesterday because he helped me with something, and I said, you know, I haven't spoke to Dan when I talked to him today since he was at Ole Miss. We bumped into each other at Disney, and I was saying to Bill, I said, our conversation just ramped off as if we've never met. You know, we've met each other like last week, and we was having a conversation, and it's kind of I won't say strange, but you know, to get those relationships are very few and far between. You know,
Yes.
and it's crazy.
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't think I've seen Bill since probably 95 or 96 or somewhere in there. Right. But we have a good enough relationship where, I mean, he sent me his dissertation when he was going for his PhD. It was so far above my head, but I gave it a shot. But you know, but we've joined together on some projects. Bill sent us a fantastic recruit to when we were at Georgia. Summer Burnett was a recommendation from Bill. So yeah, it's pretty cool that, you know, despite the distance, you know, the fact that we have history makes it easy to come back together.
A good example of that was just even Dan and I may connect a couple times a year for a conversation on the phone or whatnot. But back in December, just 6 months ago or so, out of the blue, I'm out walking on the beach and doing my usual daily walk, and my phone rings, and I see it's Dan Blank, and 2 hours later, it was just like no time had passed, and we just caught up with just everything that's been going on and touching base. And I think we haven't talked since then, but it was it kind of reinforces what you're talking about, Steve. It's just you have acquaintances and you have really really close friends that you connect with.
Yeah, I always try and say to these young coaches, you know, there's certain people that call you call them back, right? A certain name pops up on your phone, you call them back, because burning bridges with the community we're in with soccer is a large one, but it's a small community. Everybody's going to know somebody that knows somebody, and on the way up, you're going to see them on the way back down. And it all depends how you treat people, right? To me, you always should have time to talk to people, understand people, get to know people, rather than think you're on a higher pedestal than the person you're actually speaking to. You know?
Yeah.
One thing I really like to get into, Dan, is where did you come with the idea of writing and doing your books? You know, how did that come around? That you're so busy coaching and that, what gave you time to sit down and go, I'm going to do this? And not only one, I believe you've done 7 books.
I don't honestly, I know it's more than 7. It might be 10 or 11 at this point. Yeah.
Well, how did you come up with that concept, and why?
So back I started coaching in 1991. I remember my first recruiting event was the WAGS tournament in DC, Columbus Day weekend. And watching those players, you see the different age groups, and the second oldest age group was more technical than the oldest age group. The age group behind them was more technical than them. So you could see like, the future, there's people are starting to get some good coaching, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, 2 years go by, go back to WAGS, and it's the same thing, right? Like the players are definitely more talented. Players are getting more, players today are so much more technical than they were. Like I'm talking like 16-year-old kids, by and large, are way more technical than the 16-year-old females playing population back in 1991. They're way more athletic now, right? They look like soccer players. You can tell they do strength training. You know, they look athletic. But the one thing that wasn't changing was sort of just kind of some simple tactical things, right? Like there is an element that I would consider common sense that just wasn't very common. So I started cataloging these ideas on index cards. And I had this idea when I was coaching at Bruton Parker. I had about 30, 40 cards at the time. I was like, I'm going to bring out one of these a day at the end of training. I'm just going to go over one concept and hopefully they remember it. Never did that. But I kept kind of adding more cards, and those cards stayed with me for the next 20 years, 15 years, whatever it was. And I mean, I had moved many times, but that stack of index cards always made it with me somehow. And, you know, in that time, the internet became a thing, self-publishing became a thing, then it became an even easier thing. And then eventually I was at Ole Miss and I'm like, you know what, sort of just as a bucket list thing, I want to write a book. So I had this idea for Soccer IQ. It's like, all right, here's the most common mistakes I see players make. and here's kind of the fix for each of these things. So basically my approach to life generally by and large has been ready, shoot, aim. And that's how I took on this book. I just started writing, and I had written, I don't know, probably close to 10,000 words before I was like, you know what, maybe I should look on Amazon and see if somebody's already written this book. So I go on Amazon and I do a search for soccer books, and every book was either a book to teach coaches or it was a biography. Nobody had written a book to players. And that's when kind of the light bulb went on. And I was like, all right, whoever gets there first is going to win. I got to hurry this thing up. So you asked when I had the time, man, I was writing on buses, on airplanes, any free moment I got. I had no social life anyway, so I had plenty of time in the evenings, and I just cranked it out as fast as I could. And it still took another 2 years, 3 years before it actually got published. And then it took another 10 months before it kind of took off. You know, it was selling like 35 copies a month until the Soccer Journal named it a top 5 book of the year. And then, man, it just like a rocket ship, right? And for me, it was like I felt sort of like the garage band that hears their song on the radio. You know, like, holy smokes, man! Like, people are actually reading this. They're paying money for something that I wrote. Like, that's crazy, you know. So yeah, it was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, I remember back in the day when we did the curriculum for Post to Post, we was writing on the back of napkins. Right, something had come up idea. Oh, let's change this, and we'd be writing on the back of anything possible, and we'd have all this scrapped a piece of paper, and we put it all together, and then oh wow, you know, we're the #1 striker camp in the country, you know, and we're Soccer Plus, you know, it's how it just comes together.
Well, soccer. Post to Post was such a great little laboratory, right? Mm-hmm. Now, not because it was different than every other camp in the sense that it was made pretty clear, like, you're here to become a better soccer player. This isn't like go with 10 of your friends and spend some time away from home. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not like there weren't kids that kind of slipped in through the cracks, but I mean, there were some fantastic camps. I remember doing a camp up in Tacoma, Washington, and there was about 60 female players in our group, and every one of them could frickin' play. I'm like, this is unheard of at a camp, right? But they were all there for the right reason. They were all serious about becoming better soccer players, that's in effect what differentiated Post to Post from any, you know, of the college camps.
Yeah, and it's strange the way the concept came up, because like yourself, you know, you're seeing all these publications out there, but nothing about breaking down the little parts of the body mechanics that make the difference. And the way Robbie and I was then looking at it was, you know, you see all back in the day, we're on a plane and you see, and me coming from England, I had no clue what a quarterback was, or a frigging pitcher was, or a catcher, or right. And I go, you know, one thing that people always say is, God, we'd have won that game if we could score goals, or we'd have won that game if our goalkeeper was better, you know. So we looked at it, and we were specialized in strikers, you know, in the final third, and just breaking down the little information and the body mechanics that put you in front of goal, and the concept of how, when, and why, you know. And like you say, the players that were attending wanted to learn, you know, and we created a culture, which I still do now with my soccer programs that I do, because obviously with what my wife does, we get to travel every 4 years and re-identify myself in a different area, and I'm still using things that we used back in the 90s. You know, obviously we've adapted a little bit, but the mechanics are the same, the delivery is the same, you know, and the athletes have got better, like you say, you know, but going back to the mindset, you know, you got to create that mindset in the player, and the player's got to be able to open up and accept it, you know. And we're pretty lucky on the island here. I've been here since July, and our programs have been pretty successful since I've been here, which helps, but
Sure.
how would you advise a parent, right, weeding through the concept of all these different levels now in youth soccer to get what their final goal is to play in soccer? Because like we say, we've got all these different organizations, and I think what I found, the parents honestly do not know which pathway to take. What advice would you give a parent who's listened to this about creating a mindset, a standard, and how to get achieve what they want to achieve?
All right. So there was sort of a few different questions folded in there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's youth soccer is alphabet soup, right? Like ECNL, DA, all that stuff. I don't know. I'm not going to endorse one association or over another. I think ultimately the player needs to get him or herself seen, right? Which is why video has become such a huge tool. So I think the first thing is every player needs, but going into their, at the latest, their junior year and probably spring of their sophomore year, they need to have a highlight video, 2.5 minutes long. And it needs to be well done. And I can talk more about that on some other time. But right now, if you send me an email, like an introductory email telling me about yourself as a soccer player, and there's not a link to a video, you're going to the bottom of the pile, because I've got 20 other emails today with kids who have sent video. So that, I think that's the first thing is saying, look, take a look at me. Right. And then the coach, you might not get a response. Hopefully you get the response from the coach you want. That's one step. I tell you where a good bit of our recruiting comes from now is our ID clinics. And on social media, there's a couple people that really poo-poo ID clinics, and I don't understand it. They talk about how it's just a money maker for a college coach and so forth. And I disagree with that entirely. For starters, our money goes into our program, so I don't make anything from it in the first place. But like, I look at ID clinics as sort of like American Idol. It's your foot in the door. Now you got to go audition and see if you get to move on. And the great thing about ID clinics is if you have an idea of what schools you're interested in, it gives you a chance to play in front of those coaches for 3 hours one day and show yourself, right? Like, how much better of an opportunity could you possibly want? Now, I also have a problem with ID clinics in the sense that there's a lot of players that will go from ID clinic to ID clinic to ID clinic. And so they get to know each other that way, right? It's almost like a pageant circuit, and that takes a little bit of the edge out of the competitiveness. And so before our ID clinics, when I have the group together, I'll tell them, I'm like, look, you guys need to look at this like a tryout, because that's how we're looking at it, right? Like, you guys are going to have fun tonight. You're going to play a lot of soccer, blah, blah, blah. But we're only looking for somebody who can help us win a national championship. You've got to compete like your life depends on it here in the next 3 hours. And if not, then, we're going to pass on you. So I think ID clinics are tremendous avenues to get in front of coaches. But I think you have to go in with the understanding that, like, man, there might be 1 or 2 players that the staff is even going to consider, and I want to be one of them, and I'm gonna compete my tail off to make sure that I'm at the top of their discussion.
Let me ask you this real quick, Dan. And Steve and I talk about this, between each other all the time, as well as with our previous guests. In my work with what I would consider to be high-level executives, consulting, leadership, mindset, those kind of ideas, but not only in the business world, but just my connections within the soccer community or coaching in general. One of the themes that seems more prevalent now, maybe I just wasn't in tune with it back in those days in the 90s, seems like coaches are really wanting help with mindset. Okay, we do the technical, we do the tactical, we do the physical, but Bill, what can you help us so we can work with our kids' high performance mindset? Because in my opinion, that's where many of the games are, not just in life, but in reality for a soccer program, basketball, baseball, it begins and ends up here. So have you seen that evolution and that focus more now than it was 30 years ago? Are you hearing that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we just hired a mental performance coach for our team. We're blessed that she played for TCNJ soccer. She was one of the players who won their first national championship. She actually was on the team that won the first 2 national championships. They repeated. She's gone on to become a tremendous mental performance coach. And I introduced her to the team this past semester, and the players have really bought in. So I was listening to your conversation with Van Taylor, and we're talking about things have changed, right? Like kids are different now, and in some ways they're better. I think they're more responsible. I think they're more disciplined. I think they take less silly risks in terms of partying and so forth, right? They're more responsible in some of the bigger decisions. One of the things I've noticed, they're in need of constant feedback, right? Like, because they're so close with their parents, throughout growing up. And like, I was basically a feral child, as was every kid on my block, right? Like, you got up in the morning, you went outside, you didn't see your parents until it was dark out, right? When I was in college, I phoned my parents maybe once every 2-3 weeks. Our players, I would imagine every single player on my team talks to her parents every day, and many of them talk to their parents multiple times a day. Like they've had this constant source of guidance and feedback throughout their whole lives. So I think it's made them better in some ways, but I think it's kind of hampered their independence a little bit, and their ability to manage risks, like to take some chances. So I'm really looking forward to the work that our team's doing with our mental performance coach. And the first thing she did is like, all right, what's our identity? Who are we going to be? All right, and the players have to define exactly who we're going to be. And then, all right, now that we have an identity, what are the standards that equal that? And so she just kind of starts with the destination, and then we start building brick by brick. And I've got a fantastic group of players and people, and they're so responsive to coaching. They're so like, I believe in you, just tell me what to do. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how that works out for us.
When you mentioned in an earlier statement that the kids today, and I don't want to misquote you, but the kids today seem to need more feedback. In terms of the coaching world, in terms of the team, what kind of feedback are they looking for? I mean, can they handle constructive, not negative necessarily, but constructive feedback? Okay, here's an issue. Here's what we got to solve to make you a better player, blah, blah, blah. What kind of feedback are they looking for that may be different now from 30 years ago?
So they've always had technology, right? They've always had video. They've always had somebody filming them, kind of thing, right? So they're used to getting, and again, remember, these kids, every one of them was a star up at least until she got to college, right? So they've always had people showing them what they've done and so forth. My thing is, like, if you're on the field for 5 minutes, I don't know. I don't have 19 feedback items for 19 players after every game, or 22 players or whatever. Like, there's some players, they're in, they're out, but they want to know, hey, what can I do better? And it's all right. I got some other stuff I got to deal with before that. But yeah, I've made it a point to be super transparent with my feedback. Like, I I put it in writing this past semester. I wrote a synopsis of every player's fall season. This is in January. At the end of the spring, I wrote a synopsis of their spring and how they did in our spring game. And then I wrote a third paragraph, which is like, this is what I expect from you this summer. And some of this, like, it was pretty direct, some of it, like you don't play with enough courage, or you chicken out of headers, whatever it was. And it's funny, every player, so they sit in my office and they read it, and I see I see them reading it, and every player said, thank you. Like even the, like kind of the hardest hitting evaluations, like, well, thank you for telling me that. I'm going to work on that. Right. I had 2 players say, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. And I love that. Right. That's one of my favorite things a player can say is, I'm going to prove you wrong. So yes, they can take constructive feedback. I think you just have to really make sure, and takes a while, or took me a while to get good at, is to isolate the behavior from the person. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't about you as a person. It's about the player that you are. And this is how I see you, the player. And, eventually you got to be grown up enough to accept that.
Are you having much interaction with, we talked a little bit about this with Van Taylor last week, but whether it be where you're at now or in the last few schools, parents insert themselves into the relationship, and any kind of odd thing going on there in your experience?
So it's funny, Steve, I heard you talking in the last episode about, having this relationship with the parents and so forth. I'm sort of the opposite. Like I try to build a wall, in a sense. Like the first meeting I have in preseason is actually with the parents. It's an optional meeting. They're welcome to attend. Almost all of the first year players' parents come to that meeting, and I kind of lay out some ground rules and my standards. And, I tell them, like, look, I'm happy to talk about I'm happy to speak with you about your child's academic well-being, her emotional well-being, her physical health, any of that stuff. I'm not going to talk to you about soccer. Like, soccer's her thing. She's an adult. You got to let it be her thing. So that's the first thing I tell them. The second thing I tell them is, don't coach. Like, you have no idea what we're trying to accomplish. And it's even harder when you have some parents, who are good college soccer players. And so, but like, I tell them, like, it doesn't do anybody, if you're 15 yards out in front of goal with the ball at your feet, it's not helpful to hear 300 people yelling, shoot, right? Like, your kid knows what to do with the ball. Just sit back, clap when she does something well, and to be fair, most of my parents, have been great, right? Like, I love my parent group. They put on killer tailgates. They haven't interfered, so far. So, I've been tickled with the parents. I don't get too close to them. Right. It's just me. I'm a Jersey guy. We have a hard time trusting people. Right. And ultimately I know that, like, more than anything, those parents want to see their kid on the field. Right. And so let's not kid ourselves. That's going to be their number one concern. So I try to really just kind of keep at a distance. I don't want anybody thinking, I including myself, I don't ever want to feel like I owe somebody something in that standpoint. Right. Like, it's just, yeah. So I'm a little bit aloof when it comes to the parents. But I'll tell you what, and this is overall, parents have become a factor in college coaching. And, the stories are out there, and it's kind of frightening, right? Like, I'm at an age where, like, I'm glad I'm on the back nine of my career as opposed to stepping up to the first tee, because I don't know how to handle it. I didn't grow up with parents who were helicopter parents or anything like that. So I don't know how to manage that. So it's very, I think now, like, there's a lot of stories where, player gets mad at coach because player isn't playing. That makes dad mad. And then the reflex reaction is, all right, well, let's try to get the coach fired. Right. And that's, without a moment's hesitation to what you're doing to somebody's life just because your daughter's not getting exactly what she wants exactly when she wants it. Mm-hmm. So that scares me. Those are the things that scare me, and that's why, again, I'm kind of glad I'm on the tail end of things here.
Steve, address that up from your perspective. With the age group and the parents that you're working with. I mean, from the 7-8-year-old kids all the way up to your 15, 16s. And now you're stepping back into the college world as well. But Steve, what are you seeing with parents with the younger ages? And are you seeing a difference now as opposed to years ago?
Yeah, we're seeing more that the parents are living through the kids these days, and they've always got to come up for an excuse why they're having a bad game. It happens. You have a bad game. I go to work in a day, I have a bad day. It happens. But it's as if they have to come up with an excuse. Oh, we didn't go to bed till late last night, or this, or that, or you didn't score goals because of this, And what I try and implement in my team meetings at the beginning is distinguish the difference between ambition, right, and then reality, and patience, right? So your ambition is you want to be on the top team, or you want to do X, Y, Z, but rely on your patience to get where you want to be, and they want the shiny object straight away. It's like I've just done our player reviews, which we've implemented, and we've actually implemented the social aspect of it, which is off the field, and then the mental aspect of the game on and off the field. And it seems that the parents want to stay up with the Joneses, which has always been the concept. But it's even worse now because the parents create a relationship socially when they go into these tournaments, which is a little different than in college because the parents really never see each other except for maybe at a home game or something like that. But our parents are around each other constantly. And when certain players have been put on the B team and not the A team, they think it's an insult because now they're on the B team. Well, there's a JV and a varsity in high school for a reason, and you accept that. Why aren't you accepting that your player needs to have more playing time on the B team with the opportunity now to be bumped up to the A team? And why would you want your player in a situation to fail and not get playing time just because you can say you're on the A team? So it's a lot to kind of explain to the parents about the development of the player, and going back to what we've been saying from day one. I think if I reel back the coaching career, I would now go more on the mindset and the development going into a situation rather than the X's and O's straight off the bat. Right, because you've got to train a player to be in an environment rather than training them to play the game, right? Mm-hmm. And we're doing that a lot now. Obviously, being in Hawaii, you're in the middle of the ocean, So we've got to now get them in a situation that you may be a kingpin on the island here, but you got to know what's out there and can you compete? And we went to Vegas. We're looking to go to Phoenix next year. And I know there's an investment dollar bill figure on it, but if you really want your players to advance, trust in what the coach is explaining to you, and treat it like a job interview. Once you've got the job, now you're going to learn the job, now you're going to create the job, and now you're going to get promoted if you're doing the right thing in your job. And we're going into tryouts now, which is always a nightmare because everybody's like on edge with tryouts, and it's like, do the research in your coaches. What can your coaches do for your players? It's not just winning, it's development and where can they go with a pathway, and then what's the club doing for your players too. Like we've created a college pathway program to educate the parents and the players, not just the players, the parents log into virtually and we go through like an e-learning class on the different levels to get where you want to achieve. So again, we're trying to do our utmost to educate the parents, but again, they want that instant gratification. Now, my kid needs to be here.
Well,
No.
like playing time, it's always been kind of the currency of sports, right? And whether you're in high school or you're in college, like your athletic team, whatever, it's your identity. Like, oh, there's Steve, he's a soccer player. There's Bill, he's a soccer player, right? And so it's hard when you feel like, hey, I'm not getting playing time. My identity is being taken away from me, kind of thing. And I saw a great quote from Jay Billis, the basketball coach, said, talking about player roles, right? And he said, your role is not who you are, and it's not all that you're capable of. It's what your team needs you to do right now to win or to be successful, however he said it. And I'm like, there's so much in that quote, right? It's not who you are, right? Just because you're not playing, that's not how you as a person are defined. All right. And just because you're not playing as much as you think you'd like to, it doesn't mean that's all you're capable of giving, right? It's just like, this is what the team needs. There's only 11 people on the field at once. There's only 990 man minutes available. So you either embrace that role, and then follow that quote with a quote from Brad Stevens, another basketball coach, said, when you're not playing, you're either invested in the team's success or you're not. Like, it's that simple, right? So you either embrace the role.
I agree with you totally there, Dan, because when I stopped playing, I felt like I lost my identity, because that was my identity, right? I belonged to it. And like now I'm more around like friends who are police officers or military. When they step away, they have a hard time for a year or two because it's their identity. Now they're back into the regular fold of life, and it takes them a while to get used to it not being their identity, but it was a pathway to where they need to end up, and again, going back to it, I don't think there's enough information or people explaining what's going to happen at the end of it. I mean, you look at NFL players; they're playing all their life, and then all of a sudden, all right, you're not there no more. Push you to and it feels as if they're getting pushed to the side. There's and I know NFL is. I'm not sure about the other sports, but I know the NFL and the soccer in the UK is now doing interviews with the players that are coming to the end of their career to identify what their next step is.
That's the same with Olympic athletes, right? Like especially in the non-revenue sports. Like, you work so hard to achieve this goal, you reach the Olympics, and whether you medal or not, like once the final ceremonies conclude, like, what do you do? Mm-hmm. Like I've worked, my whole life has been about getting here and being a part of this, and now this is over. Mm-hmm. Like that's a I remember I think it was Tish Venturini after the 96 Olympics. She really struggled with some issues because, like, all of a sudden, she went, there's I don't know how you go from being that type of a rock star to just, the average Joe a day later. It's got to be such a tremendous transition. Thankfully, I've never been a rock star, so I haven't had to worry about it.
I just watched a show on Netflix about Vinnie Jones. I don't know if you guys have seen it, right? But obviously Vinnie Jones is known as the hardest man in football at the time because he was a bruiser, right? And there was a saying that he said in the show when they won the FA Cup, which used to be the big thing in the day at Wembley, right? Bobby Gould said to him when they was circling the field at the end of the game, chanting and with the cup and that, said, slow down, because once you get over there, it's gone. It's the end.
Yeah.
So enjoy it and embrace it while you can, right? And slow down trying to get around the field with your celebrations. And that kind of rung a bell with me last night. It's funny it's come up in this conversation today, but like in life, you take little snippets from here and here and here that that help define yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You know, everybody would love to go out like a Peyton Manning, win your last game, or um, the quarterback Denver Broncos. What was his name before? Um,
Elway, John Elway.
Elway, yeah, winning back-to-back championships, and then and they seem to be at peace with stepping aside. And this is not a condemnation of two people I'm going to mention now, but I mean, LeBron James, he's still hanging on, and he's still got the tools to play at a really high level. Aaron Rodgers. So the mindset of stepping away from, like you said, Dan, all this adulation to just going into just kind of not a regular life, but you're away from the stratosphere that you're used to. It's got to be really tough. And so when you said earlier, one of the things you say to your brand new players, look at where you're at now. There's going to be a final whistle. Are you prepared to deal with that? And I remember one thing my dad told me years and years ago when I was coaching, and that was, he said, just always remember who you are. Coaching is what you do, but it's not who you are. Yeah. Your identity is so important to embrace that and not get all tied up into, being a head coach in the SEC or whatever the case may be. You're much bigger than that because we raised you to be that way. And I think that's something that I was real grateful. I've always held on to that. And so that's kind of what you're alluding to as well, Dan, yeah?
I kind of mention it as well to the younger coaches as well, that, in our profession, and Dan probably attests to this, you're always chasing something. You're always chasing. You always want something better. If you're coaching D2, you want to coach D1. If you want to do this, you want to win a championship. You're always chasing something. And you never go, because this happened to me literally 5 years ago, right? Probably a little bit more than that. I look at what I've done and where I'm at and what my lifestyle's like, and I go, this is it, embrace it, And it's funny because the less you kind of go to achieve or you're looking for stuff, more stuff drops on your plate when you're not looking for it, So to me, it's like, oh, I must be doing something right because somebody's approached me and asked me to do something. And the defining part of my life was, obviously, healthy. You get up every morning, are you healthy? There's somebody's days worse than yours, but as long as you got your health, you got your family, and every day is an adventure. You've succeeded, So I mean, the biggest part of my life now is watching my son play baseball, even though I hate baseball. Right? It's like let's listen to and watch baseball, and that's where it defines me now. Got a nice lifestyle, get up every day, enjoy what we're at, and enjoy life, and just do the best you can do that day, and everything will be fine.
Danny, I'll text Steve sometimes and say, hey, everything going okay? How you doing today? And he'll send me a real dry text back and go, yeah, I'm having so much fun at this doubleheader today.
So yeah, I agree. Things you said, coaching it's a never ending do it yourself project, right? You're always chasing something, as soon as one season over, season ends, you're on to the next one, right? It's just, there's no finish line, right? And every time, and it's just, you're constantly also moving the goalposts, right? And you have to, it's the only way to kind of survive. I actually tried to get out of coaching, right? Like after Georgia, I was done. I was like, I can't believe this is my career. I want to do anything else. So what ended up happening was I actually spent about 9 months working for Terminix, and this is in 2022, right? Which is it's a extermination, is a bug pest control, and I was a salesman. I didn't deal with the chemicals. I hated that job. I hated it every day. I was the worst salesman in that fleet by a mile. Like the lowest earning guy on that staff was earning $80,000 a year in commissions. In my 9 or 10 months, I earned like $22,000. Like I can't stand it. I didn't want to do it. I skipped out on appointments. I was just kind of hanging in there for the health benefits. And then this TCNJ job came along, and I'm like, for somebody who wanted to get out of coaching, what Terminix did was it convinced me that, like, it reminded me how good my life is as a coach. And so, like, there are days, don't get me wrong, there are some days that it's hard, it's like, all right, got to go get on the road at 6 a.m. to go stand in the rain, watch players, recruits, play kind of thing. But my players taught me this, the team culture. There's a saying, whenever we're doing something that's difficult or not fun, like it could be on the field, it could be off the field, whether or not we're going to get home really late, or we got to, I'm making them run their tails off kind of thing. And it's, say it's the 9th repetition of doggies or whatever. And players will start saying, we get to do this. We get to do this. Right. So that's how they frame adversity. Right. We're the lucky ones. It doesn't matter what we're doing. We're still the lucky ones. We get to do this. And so that's kind of like this weekend, the PDA event was raining, like build an arc rain for 2 days. And, I'm getting up at 6 a.m. and just like the first thought in my head is, I get to do this. And that really puts it in perspective. I'm so happy that my players taught me that little phrase.
Very cool. Maybe what about from your perspective, and Steve, chime in this as well, because I know we've had these conversations, but Danny, what are you seeing? And I know it maybe doesn't filter down, to Division III. Maybe it does at some level. But like NIL and how that's impacting what's going on. I was sharing with Van Taylor last week. It was a few weeks ago. Well, actually, one of our common friends, the Division I very successful coach, him and I were having a conversation. He was just saying on that particular day, just a few weeks ago, there was 2,500 plus, female soccer players in the transfer portal. So what are you seeing and what are you hearing from your seat?
Well, so to be fair, I'll tell you this: there's many reasons I'm grateful that I'm finishing my career as a Division III coach, and NIL is one of them. Like, I think Nick Saban saw the writing on the wall and said, "You know what? I've done well. I'm out." So I don't know what's driving those huge numbers. I mean, obviously the roster cap is one thing. I tell you where it's going to get even worse is if, at least temporarily, is if the NCAA grants this 5th year of eligibility, right? Because what's going to happen is there are kids who are committed to Power 4 schools, and all of a sudden Power 4 school is going to say, you know what? I want the senior for another year more than I want you. So I'm taking back our commitment to you, kind of thing. So there's going to be that group. And that's going to make the portal even bigger and so forth. So it's a bit of a mess, isn't it? I think transferring is what I've seen. The players we've picked up some very good players. I don't go looking for them in the portal; they kind of find us. Division I kids who, we had a kid who played at George Mason, but she didn't play a lot. Right? She by the end of her sophomore year, she's like, you know what? I can go to TCNJ. I can play on a high level soccer team and make an impact. And so we get kids like that who, after their sophomore or junior year, kind of they see the writing on the wall and think, you know what? I'd rather play college soccer than watch college soccer. And so they start looking for another home. So that's one segment of players. I also think there's players who go in as freshmen. They don't get to play and they just decide to go look for a new, maybe I'll get to play more somewhere else, which I think is probably the worst reason to transfer. But yeah, there's a lot of, I don't know, man. Like it used to be when you went to college, you weren't even thinking about transferring, right? Like it was just something that it may have come up but you didn't go in there with the kind of idea, well, I can always transfer. You went to college thinking it was your home for 4 years. And that mindset has changed dramatically now with players like, all right, if it doesn't work at college A, I'll go to college B and so forth. I'll tell you one thing though, if there's a kid who's transferred more than once and she's reaching out to us, that's a red flag, right? Like there's typically, not always, but typically she's the problem. And so we're real careful when it comes to that. Like, so yeah, I just, you know, I think as Janine Garofalo said, the problem with instant gratification is that it takes too long. And you see that in, I think the transfer portal is indicative of that kind of mindset.
If they go with the 5-year eligibility, is that going to filter all the way down to 1 and 3?
I hope so. I don't know. I proposed that rule to the NAIA back in the late 90s, and I got laughed out of the room. And the reason they didn't want to do it was because the NCAA wasn't doing it. And I was like, exactly. Like, why not do something that gives us a chance to kind of recruit against some NCAA schools? Hey, you come here, you get to play for 5 years instead of 4. It got kind of like I said, laughed out of the room. Will it trickle down? I don't know. I believe it will. I don't see how it can't. You can't just make that a rule for Division I kids. Like is that, I mean, I didn't go to a day of law school, but isn't that problematic? Isn't that a lawsuit waiting to happen?
Mm-hmm.
I think the NCAA is so tired of getting sued right now. They're just getting beaten down in court case after court case.
Yeah, now there's this big rumble that the SEC is going to break away completely from the NCAA. There's all those kind of conversations that are going. Just really interesting dynamics that are happening right now.
Yeah, did you see Kirby Smart's comments the
Yes.
other day? I didn't read the article, but I saw the headline, and I'm glad he said it. I'm glad someone finally said it. But yeah, the other sports are going to suffer. It's going to be football, basketball, baseball, and everybody else is going to be on the outside looking in.
Mm-hmm. Do you deal with anything with NIL money? Is that a common thing in Division III?
It's not common. We have a program that our players can sign up, and basically their friends or family can kind of buy their jersey or whatever. But that's it. I don't handle. I've never had a single discussion about NIL with any of my players or anything like that. My kids are grounded, right? This is a big difference between, say, TCNJ and the team at Georgia. All my kids have jobs. You know what I mean? They're servers in restaurants, or they're lifeguards, or whatever the case may be. They love playing soccer. They love being a part of our university and our soccer program. And so they're not chasing the bigger. They're happy with where they're at, right? And yeah, we had one kid who made a TikTok video and got 100,000 views, and that was fun. But it's just kind of water off a duck's back. So it's a whole different dynamic that I get to work with, and again, I'm thankful. Every day, I'm thankful for it.
Steve, what are your final thoughts, man?
No, I love the conversation. We have to stay in touch more, Dan.
Yeah.
And I think the more we do this, the more you kind of, I mentioned it last week, that you kind of look back and you self-reflect a little bit, after these little segments. I mean, last week with Dan, I kind of went back because things pop up that you go, oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Or why do I really do this? And it's like Dan was saying, it's funny. I was talking to my assistant coach yesterday, and I said, when I lived in Florida, right, I never went on vacation. Because one, I'm in Florida, and two, I was doing something I enjoyed every day that was outside that didn't seem like work. And if there's any advice I could give to anybody is, do a job that you feel as if you're never at work.
Yeah.
It's like some long hours we do, right? Especially when you're recruiting at tournaments, right? You're doing 12, 13, 14-hour days, You wouldn't do that on a regular job in a cubicle in an office. You'd be grumbling, even though we do grumble when we do it. It's like, it's like the other day I was talking to the college coach here at Hawaii Pacific, and I go, I can't believe I'm here doing what I do for a living. It's
Yeah.
like, it's awesome, and it's
Yeah.
not for the money, for you, as we all know, but it never feels like we're doing a day's work in our life, really. And if I have any young players, I go, hey, find something you enjoy doing and don't feel like work.
Yep.
You know?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you'll be set for life,
Yeah, we've been blessed for sure. I was at I had my 40th high school reunion a couple weeks ago, and some people are asking like, yeah, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm a college soccer coach. I was like, I just refused to get a real job for for long enough that I could eventually make a living out of it. So yeah, but hey, because your podcast is themed about raising the standard. I wanted to share with you a quote before I go, and I heard this very early in my coaching career. I'm like, wow, this is a bit of genius. And the quote is this: "There once was a man who carved a duck from a block of wood. When asked how he did it, the man said, 'Simple. I just got rid of everything that didn't look like a duck.'" Right. And so I use that with my team, right? The duck is your standards, right? And anything that you don't want to be a part of the duck, we got to get rid of. And those are the behaviors that are unacceptable. So I figured Bill could write something really smart about that.
Yeah, or fake my way through it. Yeah, I'll maybe turn it over to AI and let AI write something for me. Listen. In tying this into standards again, when I was coaching in the Navy, the all Navy soccer team, when I was in the military, again, we're talking about 86, 87, 88, 89. I had just kind of got, I didn't know that women played soccer. I mean, I just didn't know. I didn't know there was such a powerhouse team over in North Carolina and some guy named Anson Dorrance. I just never had heard of it because my world had always revolved around men's soccer. And so I wasn't ignorant. I just didn't realize that women played. So I had some friends over in Raleigh, Chapel Hill, Durham area. So I just popped in one day. Again, I probably thought I was hot stuff, the all Navy soccer coach. And here's Anson Dorrance winning national championships. I didn't know a whole lot about Anson, but some people told me, just go knock on his door. He'll talk to you. And so I did. And I, introduced myself. And of course I was kind of enamored with him based on what I'd heard. But I remember one thing that I took away from that conversation. I remember him, I was asking for advice because I wanted to get out of the Navy eventually and then coach in college. And he said to me, Coach, set your standard for your program and never negotiate on your standards. The standard is the standard. And he said that will allow you to achieve success. Just don't compromise on your standards. I mean, he was really emphatic about it. And I probably didn't understand it completely then, but as I matured and learned from other mentors, that seems to be something that is true in every area of our life. Yeah.
So back when you first met him, right? So this is in the late 80s, early 90s, something like that. Coaching was very different, right? Like coaches had their little fiefdoms and you made the rules. And if player couldn't abide by the rules or meet the standards, you could easily get rid of them. And it was a lot easier then not to negotiate your standards. Now, you have to be way more mindful of how players are going to perceive things, how their parents are going to react to things. It's really important now, and this is one of the reasons I'm very thankful at TCNJ. You need an athletic director who's not afraid to have your back, right? That makes it. His sentiment is perfect. Never negotiate on your standards. It's perfect, right? But when push comes to shove, when a lawyer gets involved or something like that, like, is your university, is your athletic director, are they gonna have your back? And that's kind of that's how coaching has evolved from when I started to now, right? It's you have to really be willing to thread some needles in terms of, if this, I hate saying this, but like, there's moments where you're like, all right, if this goes sideways and it ends up in court, do I have the documentation? Do I have, that's what it's become. It's, you really got to cover your own rear end as you're trying to hold everybody to a very high standard. Right. So that's how it's changed. It's no longer my fiefdom. It's now, it's much more wide open than that.
One thing I remember walking into Anson's office, and by the way, that's brilliant what you just shared, because back in the early 90s, we didn't think about documenting this or documenting that. You just, you just did your thing. But when I walked into Anson's office that day, I don't know if he was just trying to throw me off because he didn't know me and I never had met him. And I walk in his office and he said, "Now, Coach, you do something with the effing Coast Guard." And I was kind of like, "No, I'm in the effing Navy, and I serve in the real effing military." And so he started laughing, and we kind of shook hands. And I don't, still to this day, I don't know if he was just yanking my chain, but it was just kind of catching me off guard there. But if there's somebody to emulate through all these years, it was Anson Dorrance and how he held the standard all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I coached a W League team in Atlanta. This is like summer of 97, 98, something like that. And we had 5 kids from UNC, 5 kids from Clemson, and then a bunch of other Division I kids. And we were a good team. We were a good team. And I'll tell you what, you get on the bus and you could tell who the Carolina kids were. Like, they were just intense to the point of like, guys, like, you're allowed to smile, like the Clemson kids were just sort of normal kids. The Carolina kids, and not just Clemson, but everybody else. But you could tell like that program affected them, right? They were just different. And there's some big names on that team. And so, yeah, I was like, man, there's something going on. I remember that was the first time I was like, wow, there really is something to that program.
Yeah.
I also remember at the time thinking, Clemson's never going to beat them. A year or two later, Clemson did beat them.
Yeah. Well, Steve, wrap this thing up for us, man.
I think overall, like I've said in the other segments that we've done, stay humble, learn from others, and ask questions. If you're not sure about it, ask a question. And like Dan says, we've been pretty blessed with what we do for a living and where we are in our final episodes in coaching. I know when I moved here, I said I wasn't going to do this again. And of course, guess what I'm doing? I'm doing it again. So it keeps pulling you back,
yeah.
And like I say, don't backtrack on your principles. Stay to your principles. I'm a big believer in discipline off the field is discipline on the field. And if you can achieve that and set your standards, everything will be fine. If you're a little wishy-washy here and there and backtrack, you're not going to be successful in what you're doing.
Beautiful. Dan, where did the name Soccer Poet come from?
Oh, what a disaster. It's like one of my big regrets in life. And it's funny because like I was in a hurry. I was being pressured. Somebody was building a website and they're like, we need the name of the website. And I was trying to think of anything that had soccer and writing connected. And 5 years later, I was like, why didn't I just call it like Soccer Scribe? Why did I go with poet? I'm not a poet. So yeah, it was just something that popped into my head, and I had a zillion other different things going on. I was at Ole Miss at the time, so I was busy with, running a college soccer program or helping to run one. And so I was just like, all right, here's a word, and put it out there. And I never loved it. I wish I could go back and have a do-over on that, but here we are.
Yeah.
And if you could send us your a link to where they can go for your book and have a look at your book,
Sure.
That'd be great.
And where can people find you online?
Honest to God, I really don't do much. I'm on Twitter. I think it's at Soccer Poet. I don't, honest to God, Bill, I do. Well, there's another thing. Like I've learned to just keep my mouth shut publicly. You know what I mean? And not for, I haven't had necessarily bad experiences, but I've watched other people, and it's amazing to me how vitriolic online discussions can be. You know, I got a friend who said, look, we got the world's greatest computer the world's ever known in the palm of our hand, and we use it to argue with strangers. And so I just tend to just keep my mouth shut, and I'll read what some other people are posting or whatever. But yeah, there's not much going on that I'm putting out into the public. Do you ever hear the story about Team Hoyt?
Mm-mm.
So I used to be a subscriber to Sports Illustrated back in the early 2000s. And my favorite piece of the whole magazine was the column by Rick Riley. It was always on the last page. It's called Life of Riley. And he would do a kind of a different special or human interest story. And one week he did a story about a father and son triathlon team. And the son is basically a paraplegic. So the father would strap him on and swim, the 2 miles or whatever. And then he would strap him on, or he would tow him on a bike for 100 miles, and then kind of strap him on and run a marathon. And it's like, it's a 1-page article. By the end of it, I'm in tears, right? Like the love between this dad and his son. And it's just unbelievable. A week later or 2 weeks later, there's a letter to the editor in Sports Illustrated. And there's, some of them were like, what a great story. And then there's one about a guy saying, this guy is setting a horrible example, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, he just really lit into this father-son duo. And I'm like, man, if you can't see the good, if this is not unanimous around the world that this is an amazing thing, then nothing will ever be. You know what I mean? Like I can't imagine there's somebody who can't get behind this idea and this story. But sure enough, there was one. So I don't remember why I got onto that story, but if anybody can tell me, I'll be happy to pull the thread back together.
Well, when we post the video description, you don't mind if I put in your contact information?
No, go for it.
Somebody wants to connect with you at the college?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Oh, what I was going to say is that's why I don't do stuff on social media, Steve. That's why. That story. Like I don't have time for the argument.
Got it. Well, listen, it's been a joy and an honor and a privilege to be in the company with both you guys, two people I admire. Maybe Dan a little bit more. I'm not sure about Steve, but one of the things that we could do, though, Steve, out here, now that Dan shared that story, we could do a kind of a team triathlon, and you strap me on your back and go swimming. You strap me on the bike, and then you push me in a little carriage. That would make a huge story all over the world, man.
I bet it
Yeah.
would.
I'll have to start a FanDuel account before you guys do that. Let me know.
Hey, well, everybody, appreciate you checking in with us today. Raise the Standard podcast. We'll have an announcement for next Friday when we have another special guest coming in. Dan, it's, again, a privilege speaking with you. Brilliant. One of our best conversations, and we look forward to continue following your career. Final Four next year, I have no doubt about that, yeah?
First of all, let me say this. What a thrill to see you guys again. It's been a minute, man, since I've seen your faces, and an honor to be included in your podcast. So thank you so very much for having me. Final Four is still up in the air, but we'll get there. We will get there. I don't know if it's this year, next year, but we'll get there for sure.
No question. No question. All right. Aloha, everybody. Mahalo for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.
Take care, guys.